Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, gentlemen, as far as I can see at the moment, but ladies, if you... Oh, no, Debbie's here. Sorry, Debbie. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this morning devotional. I'm Mike, and I'm your regular Friday host for the rest of the month. So when you see me, you know the weekend is nearly here. Right. Okay, choosing a day means that you can't choose the passage. And had I been able to choose the passage, I probably would have avoided this one. However, I do like a challenge, so I'm going to give it my best shot. So here we go with Mark 7, verse 31 to 37. And Jesus heals the deaf man. Jesus left Tyre and went up to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay his hands on the man to heal him. Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. He put his fingers into the man's ears, then spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. Instantly, the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed so he could speak plainly. Jesus told the crowd not to tell anyone, but the more he told them not to, the more they spread the news. They were completely amazed and said again and again, "Everything he does is wonderful. He even makes the deaf to hear and gives speech to those who cannot speak." Well, the first thing is that Jesus spits and put his fingers into the man's ears. And spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Now, that isn't advisable for us at the moment in these coronavirus times, but in the time of Jesus, and surely Jesus being who he was, that didn't matter. Anyway, number one, Jesus had compassion when asked to help the man who was deaf and with a speech impediment. Number two, he took him to one side so that they were alone. Number three, he healed him. Number four, he did not want the crowds to tell everyone. But number five, the crowds did. So the question I puzzled over here is why this great act of compassion on Jesus' part and this miracle, he wanted it kept a secret. I puzzled over this, and the obvious thing to do was to spread the word of this great miracle. That would be the obvious thing to do, but Jesus said no. So why keep it quiet? And as I said, I puzzled over it so much that I felt the need to consult a commentary. But then I thought, why use a commentary such as Matthew Henry when you have the real thing in the form of Ian Brown at the other end of a phone? So I spoke to Ian, and we both agreed that the act of healing is only part of a much bigger picture, and that Jesus did not wish to focus on the headline-grabbing event of the healing itself, but a more deeper and fuller message of salvation. Headlines grab our attention and often distort what we really need to focus on. In order to achieve our salvation, Jesus had to die and rise again. A very bad thing had to occur before a good thing was possible. So this whole area of healing for me is a tricky one, because I have as you know, I have an illness in the family here, which is getting worse and worse. But I want to turn the tables for a moment and give you a testimony, okay? So I'm going a little bit off piste here. Before I moved here in 1994, I belonged to a church in southwest London where I had moved in 1980 to join Tear Fund. And I was based in Teddington, where Tear Fund still is. One of the elders was a blind man named Arthur Cager. He became my mentor and a father figure to me for nearly 15 years, because I didn't enjoy a great relationship with my own father. He was a bit of a distant disciplinarian type. After I moved here, I kept in touch with Arthur until he died in 2008 at the age of nearly 90. I attended his funeral in Newcastle, where he had later relocated to be near his family. I'm going to read you an excerpt of his story. On the evening of Friday, December the 1st, 1978, a young man stepped across the threshold of our home and threw a beaker of hydrochloric acid in my face, severely damaging my eyes. I was taken to hospital where the caring medical staff did all they could to restore my sight, but blindness became inevitable. The morning after the assault, I was brooding about it, and a rising flood of bitterness and resentment developed into a desire for revenge. When suddenly God broke in, there was no doubt about his message to me: forgive as I have forgiven you. I had a deep reassurance that God had forgiven me for all my sin. Now the words of Jesus clinched it. I was hurt and angry and resentful, but I knew in my heart I had no alternative, so I asked God to make me willing to forgive. His reply was immediate. Flooding my heart with his peace was a welcome and effective alternative. A few days later, a Daily Express reporter, hearing that I was a Christian, challenged me as to how I could believe in the love of God when this had happened. She left the hospital quite perplexed with my answer. God could have prevented it, but allowed it to happen because his ultimate concern was for my good. I quoted the Bible verse, which has given me great assurance and security. We know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. Romans 8, chapter 28, which we all know. Another verse in the Bible, Isaiah chapter 50, verse 10, perfectly fitted the situation. Let him who walks in the dark, who has no light, trust in the name of the Lord and rely on his God. When I was in hospital in 1979, I was sitting in my bed during visiting time, with wards gradually filling up with family and friends. I thought it strange because nobody had come to visit me. Questions arose in my mind as this had never happened before. When I had a growing impression that a visitor had come and sat on the chair by my bed, giving me a startling conviction that it was God. Immediately, though I could not hear him speak, I realized that he was communicating as he came clearly into my mind. I will bring the blind by a way they know not. I will lead them in paths that they have not known. I will make the darkness light before them and the crooked things straight. These things will I do and not forsake them. That's Isaiah chapter 42. Arthur goes on to say, I was quite taken aback, so I had no recollection of learning that verse or ever having any need to do so. Note the I will of God's 4 promises to me, including he would not forsake me in my blindness. He was blinded at the age of 60. I knew him. I didn't meet him until 2 years after that. What I would say, he had a huge influence over my life. So, coming back to this, Arthur was not healed in his lifetime, but as a blind person achieved many great things in the name of God. Being healed is a wonderful thing, but what Jesus wants more than anything else is our focus on the bigger picture: salvation, renewal, living by the word, doing his will, and having hope for the future. There are many examples of suffering in the Bible. The book of Job is a key one. Although Arthur was always open and sometimes prayed for the restoration of his sight, he understood the bigger picture, and God used him mightily the way he was. In fact, someone actually prophesied over him once that God could better use him as a blind person. That was really hard for him, but he took it on board but he was never, ever closed off to the thought that God may one day heal him. But he knew that there was a bigger picture here. Knowing Arthur prepared me for the events in my own life when my own wife, Pam, later fell ill with dementia and had to leave home. As I said, Jesus had to die in order to fulfill his ministry, suffering for the greater good. Jesus had compassion and healed the man. But there is a much greater prize than this, and that is knowing him in all his fullness. So as we pray, let's submit to God's will and purpose for us. Ask God to meet us where we are now and make the most of the opportunities that come our way. Be prepared to take risks and move into the unknown or uncomfortable territories, which is where I am at the moment, actually. My mentor, Arthur, and his wife, Ruth, certainly did that, achieving much in their later lives, following what seemed to be a devastating setback. They never lost their hope, and so shouldn't we. And just as a footnote, I went to Arthur's funeral in Newcastle on the train, and it's just as well because he'd laid on several bottles of champagne to celebrate his final homecoming and the restoration of his sight, and I fell asleep on the way home. And here he is. There's Arthur and Ruth. Okay, that was the funeral in 2008. And that's the thoughts I'm going to leave you with this morning. Not an easy one to do, but I hope there is something in there that is valuable.